Good morning, folks. This is Talking Point here on WESN, your content capital. Sean Michael Small here, of course, alongside my ever-awake co-host, Mr. Keaton Shaw.
I'm sorry, good morning. Was I asleep there for a moment?
I mean, technically speaking, you wish you were asleep, even if it was only for a moment. Am I right?
I agree with that statement 100%. I certainly wish I was asleep, and maybe I am. In my brain, in my head. I guess we'll find out during the course of the show.
Well, quite a bit that I want to speak about today. Of course, local government elections is less than a week away. Who are you going to vote for? And even yesterday, we had somebody call in and try to explain to us just how the elections, the nature of it, the nature of the campaigning. It's not really local government, it's national government, it's legislative promises being made, technically from both sides. And it got me to thinking, just before we start the daily review, Keaton, because I saw yesterday's conversation with the Prime Minister. And it seems as though he is partially more successful in at least talking about something that has to do about local government and his party supporters that ask questions about local government. But it was still centered around reform, which is really an act of parliament and has nothing to do with the election and the candidates who are up for election and what the voters are supposed to be looking out for, right? So I am wondering, because it seems as though the Prime Minister and the PNM are correlating this election with local government reform. This is their litmus test. I believe the Prime Minister even said it. I think it was Saturday, not necessarily yesterday, but he might have said yesterday as well. You're voting for local government reform. If you don't vote, no reform. And in my mind, because the PNM has said that there are UNC councillors that want reform. So in my mind, UNC supporters could want reform, but still not necessarily want to vote for a PNM candidate. I am wondering if the Prime Minister is perhaps overstepping by correlating the two, because now he might be stuck. He could potentially, if the results for the local government election is not good, he could then potentially, by his public utterances, that's the indicator, he has defined the litmus test, no reform, even though it might not actually reflect the true will of the people. So, I mean, that leads me to the question of the day that I want to ask people. You know, do you want local government reform, and will that determine who you vote for in the local government election? But Keaton, do you think that the Prime Minister is making a mistake marrying those two things together, the local government election and the local government reform? Because it doesn't make a difference what happens Monday with regards to whether he could pass it in Parliament or not.
I don't think he's making a mistake at all. And the reason simply being is because there's been a position that has been expressed, of course, by the opposition, but also by supporters within the public domain that they do not want local government reform, from the sense that the reintroduction of property tax is what they're most against. Whilst people do want better services, and whilst people do want to have better local government and a local government that actually works for them, they don't necessarily want to go through the avenue of property tax, which is why there's been this position and this stance.
Isn't that technically two different pieces of legislation?
No, because the argument is that the property tax will fund local government and local government reform. So what is taking place is that the Prime Minister is pushing this narrative, and he has every right to do so on the campaign trail, that, listen, we can actually make local government work for you. Local government has been around for quite some time. Whether or not it's working, and I get this entire notion that it hasn't been working at all. So I'm wondering why it is we've even had local government for the last few decades. But the point is, if you want local government to actually work for you, if you want more efficient services, if you want effective local government, if you want to see better roadways and road management, if you want to see better drainage, better facilities, then you have to vote for us, because we're the ones that are pushing local government reform. You're absolutely right in saying that the results of the local government election will not determine what can happen within cabinet or what can happen in Parliament. However, I think the Prime Minister is also trying to concrete his position. It's, it's similar to this in the United Kingdom. Do you remember when the Conservative Party had about 3 different prime ministers over a 5-year period?
Yes.
And there was election after election, not by-election, but election after election. Boris Johnson called an election in order to reaffirm his position. And I think that is what the Prime Minister is pushing here. If the government, or by extension the People's National Movement Party, are successful in the local government election, and they will judge success by either retaining the currencies that they have or gaining one more corporation.
Right.
Right? Because if they lose 1 seat or 1 corporation, yes, sure. But if they retain it, they're going to go ahead with it. But he's using this to affirm his position that local government reform is what people of Trinidad and Tobago want.
I have yet to hear the opposition take my stance because, in my opinion, and technically speaking, if all they're against is property tax, maybe they can't use my idea or my thought process right now to counteract reform. The Prime Minister believes that the opposition just wants to oppose for opposing's sake, which may or may not be true. With regards to property tax, that is a contentious issue that not everybody is on board for. But if you look, I mean, the PNM has an animation that they've released and they've showed, I think at least last night, and it shows the convoluted process that local government, in theory, has to go through. You speak to your council speaks to the entire local government body, they go to the CEO then speaks to the technocrats, and then it goes up the chain to the ministry, and the ministry of fine or whatever. And it seems as though it has to wind through so many offices before it gets anything done. And one thing is the money to finance it, but another thing is the new systems, and that, I believe, should have its own debate to property tax, because you could still make the current resources that are available, you could still use them more effectively, more efficiently. And in theory, if the reform is all that it's promised to be, even without property tax, it would still be a step forward, even if it's just an incremental step forward.
Listen, in my opinion, I think there's been a sense of laziness in local government for quite some time. Whether or not local government reform actually removes that attitude, that laziness, that mentality, it's yet to be seen. Because, listen, prior to any local government reform taking place, your communication between your councillor and yourself should not have been affected. And I've realized that actually, this is taking it from a different aspect. Even the communication between one's councillor and a citizen who is facing difficulties or is to make a complaint, that has proven to be a challenge.
Well, when the councillor has very little effective authority.
It's whether they have very little effective authority.
Granted, yes, they're lazy.
Trying to even get in contact with your councillor has proven quite difficult. Trying to get a response from your councillor has proven very difficult. You don't see your councillor at the office, and this is not for every single councillor, but this is a general narrative. I don't see my councillor until local government elections come around. You know, that's the only time within a 4-year period that I actually see them or I actually know who they are. In fact, I forget who they are during this 4-year period. That is a general narrative. However, you also have to bear in mind that isn't it quite remarkable that over 4 years, local government doesn't necessarily have the money to execute its responsibilities in an effective manner. Yet, the months and weeks leading up to an election, all of a sudden, they have the resources and they have the capabilities. Where's this extra push coming from? We're not stupid. We all have an idea. But this is the thing. There is a mentality of laziness. You can have more money. It'll still be difficult in procuring the necessary resources. I mean, again, the Minister of Works and Transport, as well as the Minister of Public Utilities, have spoken about how difficult it's become to actually get bitumen in order to pave roads. So even if you have the money, still getting bitumen is going to prove a challenge. It's a mindset, it's a struggle, and a lot more needs to be done. And you can only hope that local government reform changes that side of it as well.
Well, it was said that 80% of roads in the country are technically under the purview of local government. So therein lies the question. Ministry of Works could only do so much paving, you know, and it's not as though we see the highways being paved all over. What we see is the boroughs, the city corporations, the municipalities. That's where we see paving. So that's a very good point. If somehow it's the Minister of Works and Transport that's doing it out of his budget, then you have to ask, hold on, is this even how it's supposed to be? Is this how the relationship is? Why is it that the ministry now is coming in and using its budget for this? Shouldn't it be using its budget on developmental contracts? So folks, let's not get too sidetracked though. I really am curious there. We will have that as a question in the year. We bring it back just for today, at least for now. Do you want local government reform? Property tax, no property tax? You know, that's up to you how you want to phrase your answer. But then, will you let that determine who you vote for in the local government election? And just for an example, I'll tell you straight up, I do want local government reform, but that is not how I'm going to vote for the local government election. Can't tell you who I'm going to vote for. I'm just letting you know that's not a factor in my determination. Prime Minister, I'm sorry, but I'm not necessarily going for that shtick. But folks, what we'll do, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll get into the daily happenings over the last 24 hours with the daily review. Stay tuned here on Talking Point on WASN, your content capital. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. So, of course, in this local government election cycle, aka on the road to the general election, let's just call it like it is, right? We ain't really, apparently, at least a good chunk of us aren't that concerned about local government election. It's the general election. We've started campaigning for the next general. It's a little over a year away, am I correct, Keaton?
Yes, 2025.
2025, early 2025, right?
Middle of 2025.
Middle of 2025, so it's more than a year away.
Yeah, we've got about 2 years.
2 years away, okay, I was wrong. 2 years away, 2 years from now. Look at that, we've already started campaigning for the general election 2 years from now. One could argue that maybe that's what the opposition is supposed to do from the moment it lost the last general election, whoever the opposition might be. But anyway, with this local government election / general election beginning on the marathon, let's not even say road, 2 years of campaigning, G's and H's. I wonder if they can keep it up. Crime, of course, is a big issue, but recently, while the opposition leader's comments has made a lot of media and caused a lot of people to talk about it and give their opinions about it, one of the issues that the opposition has seemingly been pushing with some degree of success, for better or worse, is the Prime Minister's apparent, or they claim, lack of declaration of his townhouse that he purchased in Tobago. And this prompted the Prime Minister to reveal his forms, his Integrity Commission forms. Form A, usually kept confidential. And I do find it interesting, given the wording of the Integrity Commission, Keaton, as they spoke to the opposition, rather, when they said that the Prime Minister failed to include particulars of the townhouse in a statement of registrable interest for the said year, which constitutes a breach of the IPLA, it was not a breach or an offense which could be referred to Director of Public Prosecutions in pursuance of Section 31 of the IPLA, breach of a code of conduct, and 34, subsection 7 in the IPLA, offenses. And then they went on to basically state, it was reported that they said that they were satisfied in Hussein's complaint about it possibly being a gift, and their investigators looked into it. They found that it was not a gift. They closed the investigation. And the opposition has basically accused them of potentially, maybe getting inducements, and they claim that, well, no, our board and our investigations are independent of each other. In people other than members of the Integrity Commission conduct the investigation.
Who appoints the investigators?
That's a good question.
See, my thing is that usually if the Prime Minister comes out and releases such documents, I would say, okay, great, wonderful. He has now released his information, it's public. Because he went to his social media account yesterday and posted the declaration forms. But what has me a bit confused, and I'm actually trying my very best to wrap my head around this, is that according to a letter from the Integrity Commission to MP Saddam Hussein, it stated that the Prime Minister did not actually declare the townhouse at Sherburne Road in Tobago. Now, that is in the letter from the Integrity Commission, yet the Prime Minister then posted forms in which it stated that they will, he actually did indeed write it and he did declare it. I'm sorry, Sean.
So, no, he had it on his social media. So I'm kind of confused what the Integrity Commission is saying.
So then I'm not only confused about that, you're confused only what the Integrity Commission is saying, and then two, it obviously leads you to question how genuine those forms were.
Yes,
right?
Unfortunately, we have to go there because of the situation.
I would truly like to give the benefit of the doubt to the Prime Minister, given that he has posted the forms to social media. But given the
dated
right
2019.
Now, given the story of the Integrity Commission, and given what the Prime Minister has posted, I don't know exactly what the truth is. Are those forms genuine, or are they just backdated and signed? Or is the Integrity Commission making a muck of this? Have they made mistakes? They went on to say that they were only investigating him in terms of gifts, because the Prime Minister did not unknowingly, share false information. So my thing is that, would you consider $480,000 discount a gift, or would you just consider it just a discount?
I mean, now we're going into some real nitty-gritties on ethics and what constitutes a gift. And this might be a situation where it would be best if we have these things well defined up front, aka market value, no discounts, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Now, the thing is, right, there's two things. One, it's what the Integrity Commission is reported to have said in correspondence with the opposition. That's what makes this confusing. I'm not just taking it, the opposition's word for it. Something happened, right? So now we're going to not believe the Prime Minister. Because if it was reversed, it would be the same thing. A politician makes a claim against another politician. That's he said, she said, right? But the third party, the neutral third party in the middle, well, what's supposed to be the neutral third party, is what's giving us something that contradicts potentially the authenticity of the documents. And then the second thing is, though, on the flip side, because you mentioned, what if the Integrity Commission mucked it up? And I'm wondering if the difference is apparently between Form A and Form B, because the Prime Minister saying, well, there was nowhere to state townhouse on Form B. And some people might say, well, isn't it obvious? But I would argue, when you fill out a form, you just fill out what the form wants. You don't necessarily think further ahead. That usually a government form, you're not supposed to state more than what the form wants. And perhaps now, because of the differences in the forms, if that is true, that's how the Integrity Commission kind of mucked it up.
I even looked at how that form was filled out, and I was like, wow, this is how you fill out an official document. That's rather incredible. I guess that's the least important part of this conversation, but crikey. But it
could be better, though. That's the unfortunate thing.
What has me questioning is that the Integrity Commission, and I'm quoting now, it says, the Commission also concluded that while the Honourable Prime Minister had failed to include particulars of the townhouse in his statements of registrable interest for the said year, which was 2019, which it constituted a breach of the IPLA, the Integrity in Public Life Act. It was not a breach or an offence which could be referred to the Director of Public Prosecutions. How do we determine, if there is a breach of the IPLA, how do you determine whether or not that it should be sent to the DPP? I would argue, if there's a breach of an act, shouldn't there be some level of criminal investigation?
Apparently, it reads as though what they're saying is, there are so many subjective things about this, but somehow we have a specific rule here that says that whatever the Prime Minister may have done, it might be a breach, but it's not a breach that we could pass on. Somehow we're specific enough in that one instance, but otherwise, you and I looking on, it seems to be very subjective overall. Because how do you determine a gift is it's not a gift, it's a discount is not a potential unethical way to pass on.
And then it said, the commission said it was satisfied with Saddam Hussein's complaint about an alleged possible gift received by the Honorable Prime Minister. It required investigation and did so over the ensuing year. It said the investigations unit subsequently recommended that the investigation be terminated, which it accepted. One, what outcomes or revelations came from that investigation that suggested it should be closed? I want to know the reasons given as to why it was closed. All of these things, you see, for me, again, you want to give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt because he posted the documents to social, whether or not they're genuine. That is the big question because they're two different stories. People have made an issue about the Prime Minister playing golf. I've had no issue with the Prime Minister playing golf.
Yeah.
People have made an issue of him wearing a fancy watch. To me, I like nice things in life.
I looked at the watch.
Right.
It's 300 US, right?
I know.
think a man in his position, that's not a big deal.
Yeah, but we have people out here that will spend 500 US on a pair of shoes. We all
Exactly.
We all like nice things. I had no issues with that. I had no issues with him playing golf or whatnot. And therefore, I would say, okay, great that the Prime Minister he wants to post these forms. But given the stories from the Integrity Commission, given the story from the Prime Minister, I'm so sorry, Honourable Prime Minister, unfortunately, the questions that are being raised here this morning cast a great doubt over the authenticity of everything involved here.
I think the problem is the Integrity Commission is saying things with not enough explanation for the public to put this to rest, right? Now, granted, this is what it's telling the opposition, but the flip side is assuming that the opposition has not, well, I believe this is what they have told the opposition, assuming that the comments that the Integrity Commission have not been edited with pertinent information removed, right? So they might have revealed more, it's just we might not have seen what those comments are, right? So assuming that we've seen all that the Integrity Commission has said on this.
Apparently the reasons why the investigation was closed was actually disclosed to MP Saddam Hussein, but we have not,
Right.
I have no information on that.
Assuming that the opposition is not editing, right, or whoever is not editing, right, then I could say the issue is the Integrity Commission not revealing enough information to put the debate in the courts of public opinion to bed. Now, apparently, one political activist is going forward with this in the courts. I have no problem with this in the sense of, again, the litmus test is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Let the courts deal with it. If a judge sees confidential information that we're not supposed to see and says it's fine, or something is wrong here, I'm okay with that, right? But at the same time, one of the things out of this election that makes me uncomfortable is the amount of accusations being thrown about, but yet, in most cases, they don't seem to be taking any legal action about these things. They're saying that laws are broken, both sides, but we're not seeing any legal action. And in the Prime Minister's case, I appreciate him revealing documents, but it's the Integrity Commission's reported statements that's putting doubt on the whole situation, because it's very confusing.
Also, back to what we initially said with regard to the investigation, the Commission said that its 5 members, so the 5 commissioners, do not personally conduct investigations. There is an investigation unit within the Integrity Commission. But who appoints the individuals to conduct these investigations? I would assume it's the Commission. I would hope it's the Commission. One could make that assumption.
I hope it's not the Public Service Commission, because I don't know, I can't even begin to figure out the potential pitfalls of that, but
whatever it may be at this point, once more questions have been raised. There are certain doubts, there are uncertainties, and like I said, given the story of the Integrity Commission, given the Prime Minister posting the documents and the dates seen on the documents and what was filled out, honestly, it's very difficult at this point to say to the Prime Minister, you know, you're out of the dark. It's just really, really unfortunate.
And this is why I would say transparency, it can work for you. Again, at least the Prime Minister, technically, he did his attempt. He did a reasonable attempt to be transparent, but the Integrity Commission, we need to hear more from them.
Isn't it rather ironic, Sean, that there are now questions as to whether or not the Integrity Commission indeed has integrity in its practices.
Any independent body has to be questioned at this point. But I want to get this at least the second story in, because I don't believe you were able to comment on this. And it started over the weekend, right, where we got the reports about August the 1st, licensing officers were there under the invitation of ACP Collis Hazel, the head of the Tobago Division. And in more than one instance, the Transport Commissioner has had to speak out, or at least he's now spoken out. He was on a Tobago Morning Show, I believe, yesterday. And he is more or less saying, well, we are here not to frustrate people, but to educate, and that they have seen certain patterns of behavior, I assume with vacationers in peak periods in Tobago, when it comes to driving, that concerns people whose job it is to enforce road safety and road traffic laws. And apparently one of the things, beyond the fact that there's certain behavior they're trying to head off that could result in accidents, that could result in injury or death. One of the other things is the fact that apparently a lot of people go to Tobago and they kind of take it for granted, my license expired, or I don't have it, or whatever, or I might have even like lost it, or I never had it, but I could drive, or my son could drive, or whatever have you. There's also foreigners that might violate traffic laws. It's just that vacation period of time, fast and loose on it. Of course, I remember speaking to you off air just a little bit that the Chief Secretary, he kind of took major affront, major umbrage to this exercise. He didn't like it. It reminded me of the mayor in the first Jaws movie. You know, the beaches have to stay open. You know, the roads need to stay open. We have tourists, we have money to make. And it's not as drastic an example, and it might be unfair for me to make that comparison directly with the Chief Secretary.
What an interesting analogy.
But whenever I think of a politician that's concerned, especially when it comes to tourism, about economic prosperity over whatever law, regulation, or safety regulation, that's what pops into my head, because it's just such an easy example.
You know, the news, the traditional news outlets do not always cover what information is revealed via social media platforms. And I think it was last week I saw a video circulating on social media of an individual who is driving their car onto the ferry heading to Tobago. And he said, you saw the vehicles. He said you saw licensing officers, but you saw the vehicles, and apparently the logo, the emblems on the vehicles were taped up. They were covered, in other words. So there was an idea that, you know, they were going to Tobago, but they've actually just gone and covered it.
Yeah,
up.
they went incognito.
Right. So that was allegedly
That's,
on the very.
That's
that
actually
happened
kind of
allegedly. I'm just saying, because
potentially
you don't
smart
know,
if it works.
You don't know if those things actually are true or whatnot. But it seemed quite. If you take a look at the timeline, it's.
To be fair, why would any other government body try to cover up their logos?
But anyway, the thing for me is the police officer in charge of the Tobago Division, Collis Hazel, says that the Transport Division, the commissioners, they don't need any permission to come to Tobago. But then Clive Clark said we were invited by the Tobago police officer. I don't see anything wrong with the Transport Division carrying out these exercises in Tobago. I see absolutely nothing wrong.
To be fair, I did in the first pass, at the first time.
However...
But you've changed my mind.
However, what I think is not very pleasant in learning, and this is in a conversation with attorney at law Martin George a couple of weeks back, where he said for simple little offences, very simple offences, such as individuals having a scratch on their tint, they were issuing tickets, right? And he says they were not giving them the opportunity to actually fix these things. They were just issuing tickets for very minor offences.
I did not realize
right?
that if your tint is scratched, that
Sean,
is a ticketable.
If your number plate is scratched...
That's different.
No. Listen to me. I'm just saying, if your number plate is scratched, if your headlight is still working, but it's cracked, that's an offense.
But I can understand those things because...
If your tint is too dark, it's an offense.
I can understand that as well.
If your tint is scratched, It's an offense.
I don't understand that. My scratch tint is compromising the tints and making it easier to see in my car, not harder.
Yes,
so I
but
am
the
just...
argument is that it could actually deter your vision, right?
Okay,
If you're
okay.
sitting in a car, and, you know,
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
in practice. But anyway, the point is, Martin George was making that argument, saying that it is unnecessary and it's not justifiable if it is that you give them a warning, you fix it. If they come back to Tobago as they are doing now and the exercises are conducted and they realize that these are repeat offenders, all right, fair enough. But for the most minor things, and he also said that they were making, which is something we've heard before, they were making people wait for a while. Just out of spite, they would have their driver's license, they would have their insurance, they were making them wait just out of spite in the middle of the day. So all of those things you have to consider. There needs to be obviously created dialogue between the TTPS, the Transport Commission, and the heads in Tobago. But I still would say that the comments made by the Chief Secretary in regard to this could sour quite quickly. You might want to say, okay, you're empathetic to his position, and you understand where he's coming from, fighting for the people of Tobago, given that how these are certain things being stated. But he also needs to be very careful of the words that he chooses to use, because it's in a way, the perception that could be out there from people interpreting it is, this is...
In a way,
yeah, it's undermining the
If somebody
power,
says, I could do something bad to you, but that wouldn't be a good idea, isn't that a threat?
Yeah,
It
that's what I'm
could
saying.
be a family member, it could be a stranger.
It's undermining the authorities. That's what it is.
And that's the thing, because we've said it before. You wanna enforce law and order, you have to include some of these small laws as well. Now, we don't know if this exercise that started from August 1st, and I'm not sure if it's gone into this week, we don't know if it's nickel and diming the people of Tobago and the visitors to Tobago. Or maybe they are giving out more warnings now and they really are focusing more on educating, etc., in this pass, right? Maybe they did take some feedback and apply lessons learned, right? We haven't heard the same type of stories for this event as we did the previous one. But the Chief Sec basically all but threatened the TTPS without technically threatening the TTPS. And I find that was just a bit too much. And I'm sorry, if anybody else did it, especially if the Prime Minister did it, because we were just talking about the fact interference of the police by the Prime Minister, by the Minister of National Security, by the government. We just had that a couple of weeks ago, and now the Chief Secretary is saying, well, I wasn't consulted. Why do they have to consult you on a road traffic exercise? You're not a part of the police service or the national security apparatus. You have less right than the Prime Minister, who's head of the National Security Council.
Who is not consulted? The Chief Secretary?
Yes.
Maybe it's to give due warning to certain individuals that you should be driving with valid licenses, or at least have your license on you. Maybe that's why he was upset that he wasn't consulted.
Well, okay, folks, we're over time. Let's take a break because I actually have something I really want to talk to Keaton about and hear his opinion. The new administrative building at the Ministry of Health was, opened?
I suppose there was that opening ceremony.
And it's in use by the Ministry of Health now. Some figures on the finances were revealed, and it seems to be based off of a new practice that will be coming into play with further projects down the line. So we'll get into that.
Was that solar panels?
No,
oh,
no.
Okay.
We'll get into that after this.
Before I close, I think the taxpayer of this country needs to know how their monies have been spent. Currently, in the locations which I called out, we pay $1,045,978.93 in rent. And we have been paying rent for decades with nothing to show for it. absolutely nothing. So the taxpayer has gotten nothing tangible. With this concept, with this bold design, build, own, lease, transfer, the total sum approved by Cabinet was $471,307,920. That's the value. The payback per month, the lease per month, is going to be $2,618,377, VAT exclusive. But at the end of 15 years, the taxpayer will own this. It will be yours. It will redound to the benefit of the country at large, because you will have something tangible at the end of 15 years. When one considers how much hundreds of millions of dollars we have paid in rent, rolling from one location like the Rolling Stone, remember Papa was at Rolling Stone, and now we have nothing to show for it.
Ministry of Health would have been moving all over Port of Spain, living from place to place like Ms. Howard Cat. But the bottom line is you were paying some significant monies to occupy private sector entities and offering some of them substandard for all you know, and you pay good money for it. And we found a way to do it, and let's get it done. And it's been done like clockwork. So therefore, we have discovered something here to allow private sector to raise the funding, carry the expense. There's a cost to it, of course, but carry the expense for a decade or so and allow the state to have the facility, and you pay down on it going forward, and eventually you complete the payment and it's yours. 15 years sounds like a long time, but I've been in government for 8 years already. It looks like only yesterday. And of course, these sort of things, in the scheme of things, what is the alternative? Leaving it the way it is. You just heard from the minister, we are paying $1.2 million a month for rent to accommodate the Ministry of Health. You don't see that. But imagine that's $15 million a year, just for rent. And after 10 years, what's that? Minimum $150 million. So if you hear this building is going to cost $200 million or $240 million, just figure out what the rent will cost. And at the end of 10 years of rent, what's the story? You still haven't got anything other than to rent. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a horizon at which this expenditure would deliver ownership of the structure, because you already own the land. That wasn't going to be, if we had to go and buy a piece of land or buy this site, the cost of the fit of the building would have been, the facility would have been much more. So we have other arrangements. We have other arrangements like this. And this was a learning experience, and I think we've done well. And I think the Ministry of Health, its staff, and the contractor who did this job need to be congratulated.
That was the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister explaining the reason why they have undertaken a bold agreement, that is build, own, lease, transfer. That is to say, the contractor that built the building, which I believe is NH International, they built it with a loan, they own the building, they're the current owners, and the government will lease it for the next 15 years. And at the end of it, they will transfer the ownership. The government has not paid, from what I understand, for the construction. So NH has technically, in the red over this building. They will accrue that money back via the profit of the lease agreement. Now, the Minister of Health, Keaton, basically said that Cabinet approved of $471 million plus change. When you look at what the Minister of Health said was the lease amount per month, and you multiply it out, you get the total value lease would more or less come up to that. It's like $60 under, $471,307,860. When you factor in the cost of the building, even though it seems as though we're paying more in the lease than we did in the rent, when you factor in the cost of building, for the public anyway, it seems as though this is not that bad of a deal, because we would have had to pay us that fraction of money anyway, 188 million, for rent over 15 years. So that's almost 200 million. And then the cost of the building is about 274 million. This is from one of the news reports. So if that is proven to be true, for the most part, we're kind of getting a 200 or almost $300 million building, but we don't have to commit the capital up front for it, right? And we're spreading it out over 15 years, and a good chunk of that money would have been paid in rent anyway if the move wasn't made. So I find it's an interesting way to deal with the fact that we have liquidity problems. To nitpick it, it seems as though the profits for NH...
I'm sorry, hold on. The value of the building is 270-something million.
The construction cost is like 270 plus million.
Right. We're paying about 30 million a year for 15 years, which is about 400, which is 450
30 million a year, yes, for 15 years.
450 million. That's good.
Because when you add the cost of the building and the amount of money that you paid you would have paid for rent anyway, it kind of works out. You're essentially, the lease is covering the construction costs as well as the rent that would have been paid.
So a good point raised by one of our colleagues was who's actually covering the maintenance of this building over the 15 years?
Well,
the government doesn't own the building. At
yes.
this point in time, it will be NH International. You would assume that the responsibility of that maintenance will fall on NH,
well,
but that has not been made clear.
So technically, when you pay rent, I mean, that's, you would agree to who does maintenance and who doesn't, but I believe to some extent a rental agreement would include, and a lot of commercial rental agreements would include maintenance. Of course, we won't reveal that information. The other thing is, this gets more complicated because it's not an upfront purchase. So how do you factor in inflation and rising costs and to be fair to both parties? That, I'm not an economist, I can't say. On paper, on the surface, it seems like a reasonable deal. There is a slight discrepancy when you look at the difference between the cost of construction and the differences between what you would have paid for the lease and the rent. There's like $8 million, maybe that's NH's profits, I'm not entirely sure, but they are getting what would have been the rental money that the previous landlords would have gotten. That also, one could argue that's a good chunk of profit there.
So yeah, but the thing is that, and forgive me, I'm glad that we actually have a building that we would be, the government owns quite a number of properties and still chooses to pay rent.
Yes.
Right? And that has been a pet peeve of mine. I don't understand why it is you have so many properties at your disposal, but you choose to pay rent anyway. We spend about $10 million a year in rent. For, I think, various properties, the Paho building, the Secret Heart Girls building. The
You're talking about the Ministry of Health, right?
Ministry of Health.
It's 12,500,000 plus.
Right, and now we're paying about 30 million a year for our own building over the next 15 years.
But technically, part of that is covering the construction costs.
It is.
Right?
I understand.
As in the costs, NH built it. According to how the deal works, the government has not given him any money to build it. He's done it with a loan. So,
it's being paid somewhere else.
well, again, there's a $8 million difference. It's not like exact. So I don't know if that's his profit on the construction. But then, of course, technically speaking, NH gets what would have gone to the landlords of the rental properties. NH will get all of that as the sole leaser of the entire administration of the Ministry of Health.
To be honest with you, I'm an advocate for public-private partnerships. I think they're beneficial. I think that they've proven to be effective. Whether or not this is smart business, I mean, at this point, I'm really not seeing it much, but maybe that's just, I don't know, maybe my site is not as good as others.
I mean, I actually thought that this looked like a horrible arrangement until I mapped it out. And and assuming that the cost of constructing the building is legit and isn't inflated in some way, it seems as though for the most part, if it's a slightly bad deal, we've had a lot worse deals with regards to government projects. And potentially it proves that this might be a model moving forward, because again, the key point is the government does not have to put out a whole set of capital at a time when we don't have necessarily capital to put out. The interesting thing, though, is not only is this technically out of the Patrick Manning playbook, but the contractor that was doing it out of the Manning playbook from Manning's last administration is the contractor that actually was complaining about Manning's choice of contractor that sunk the previous Patrick Manning administration. And I don't know if, it's just irony, but it is said that the owner of NH International may or may not have ties with the current administration. But the math does not suggest that it's some major con job. So the optics, a lot of critics might come out and have a lot of questions, and maybe there's more details that reveal more. I do find the irony somewhat interesting, though, when you think about the historical context of the players involved and the fact that the waterfront was basically to do this, to stop the government from renting certain properties in Port of Spain.
Government could still stop paying rent for many properties. They have their own, but oh well, congratulations on the opening of the new Ministry of Health headquarters. Maybe you can share your thoughts and opinions with us. Sean did the maths. He said, to borrow
I have it right
the
here.
maths is maths. Oh, crikey, he did a whole Excel spreadsheet.
That's right, yeah.
That's good. That's really good. That's commendable. That's actually really commendable. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. Anyway, let's take a break, and you can share your thoughts and opinions with us after this news on the hour.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, we're speaking about a lot of political topics. We just got a new administration building for the Ministry of Health. The maths seem to be mathsing, although one could argue it's still preferentially beneficial to those involved. Maybe it's fine because it could be a decent deal for the country, assuming we're not missing any pertinent details on the finances. We did speak about the Prime Minister's interesting situation with the opposition's accusations over his lack of declaring a townhouse in Tobago, over the fact that the townhouse might have been discounted, and what does that possibly mean? And the Integrity Commission more or less saying, we're going to terminate the investigation because we're content that everything is fine and there's nothing to see here. And we also spoke about the licensing exercise or the road traffic exercise in Tobago. If you have any opinions on this, if you have any opinions with regards to what's happening with our local government elections and local government reform, we're going to open the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. But on that last topic, of course, today we have a question for you. Let's go with the question today. And of course, I am simply asking, do you want local government reform? And will that determine who you vote for at the local government election, right? Because according to the Prime Minister, it's implied a vote for the PNM, a vote for PNM council is a vote for local government reform. I don't like that because I would think there are people that are supporters of other political parties that might actually still want local government reform. And I don't think this is going to be enough for them to change their vote just for that litmus test. So answer it however you want to, whatever qualifier you want to give. Short version of my answer is, I want the reform. No, that's not going to determine who I vote for the local. Keaton, care to give the short answer for yourself on that question?
No. I actually do not, because if I further this conversation anymore, it might reveal my choice on the day that the polls open.
I say that I'm, all right, okay, fair enough. I only thought it out for my position. I did not necessarily think about all of the possibilities for all of the other positions. So folks, that's the question. You don't have to answer, but I would very much appreciate it if you do.
What is most interesting, though, is that I think that the candidate for the position of councillor for my particular district, the incumbent party have not selected the same candidate who has been in that position for the last 2 local government terms.
Yes.
It's a new candidate. So it's difficult because, as I said before, it was rather the communication between councillor and the district was very much not there. Difficult to get through to them, to get a response. Even getting a response from the chairman of the corporation at times, whose email address was public, whose number was public, no. So
I mean, I've heard the same with regards to the incumbent, right, in my area. But now the question is it the same incumbent? For us, it just might be. So that leaves us to the question, do we want more of the same? We have a caller from Faizabad. Good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Keita.
Morning,
Good
morning.
Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, with respect to local government election and reform, that wouldn't change my opinion on my voting. Because that's just hogwash. That has been in the air for too long. So don't make it a vote promise, and at the end of the day, we wouldn't get it anyway. With respect to Dr. Rowley's and the Integrity Commission, I want to remind people Mr. Pandey was in prison. Yes?
Yeah.
They said he didn't declare something. Was it on the B form?
was he failed to declare his English bank account.
Right. So, you understand what I'm saying? So we need to do some investigation with respect to that. With respect to the Prime Minister and the polygraphing, I realize he's a good supporter of polygraphing for the police and everything, but he himself needs to take one because Mr. Gary Griffith has challenged him. And I realize none of the media houses are suggesting or even asking him a question about that. And he comes on air every night and talk a pack of hogwash and he's not subjecting himself to it at all. If he is man enough, let him stand up and do the polygraph because it is alleged that he himself asked favors of the former commissioner. And if that is true, the public must be made to know about it. He's very dishonest as proven. Remember, he was the same fella who went to Ken Gordon's home in the dead of night, when the land date affair was being investigated. And what he said, he went for a cup of tea at 10:13 in the night. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller.
It's a very odd time to have a cup of tea.
Well,
I hope it was decaffeinated. Anyway, the thing is that, and you please forgive me for my laughter, I haven't heard that word hogwash in quite some time.
really?
Yeah, right.
I haven't said it? You haven't said it?
No,
I think I said it.
You say other things like hyperbole, and there's another
That's
one,
true,
like-
hyperbole.
and the bubble. Yeah.
That's right, bubble.
Yeah. So
This
yeah.
is TNT, politics is littered with bubble. Too much bubble.
Anyway, Koala, thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you very much for your expressing your thoughts and opinions with us this morning.
It was interesting you said that we won't get it anyway in the end.
Well, that's
Because it's been on the cards for however long.
I think that is something that is quite often happens. Look at, for example, campaign finance reform. This is probably the fourth or fifth time I'm raising this in the last 2 weeks.
But you could see where our political parties have a vested interest in not reforming campaign finance. Local government, on the other hand, is not really something I believe that would hamper their interests. In fact, it might improve it.
I'd like to add to Sean's question, if you will permit me.
Of course.
Do you take local government seriously? Do you see the benefits to local government here in Trinidad and Tobago? And do you think that local government reform will allow for greater benefits? So just informally adding that to the question this morning, do you see the benefits of local government? Do we take local government seriously? That's another aspect of it, which is why there are doubts regarding local government reform.
I mean, I think the short answer for most people would be no, right? Now, the question is, to what extent is that because we are not aware of what local government can do, so we're only aware of when we run into the brick wall of what they
But
can't.
I appreciate the point that the caller from San Fernando raised last week, and that is the responsibility for the maintenance of schools will also fall under local government reform.
Yes.
And that is going to cause a lot of headache.
If that goes through, then property tax has to go through. If that goes through without property tax, then it'll be a disaster. We have a caller from Sugar Nuts. Good morning, caller.
Good day, gentlemen.
Morning,
Hey,
morning.
Hello.
I've been trying to follow this business for the purchase of the townhouse and Tobago. And the important point, I really haven't heard it. Now, it is true, any asset any public official acquires is supposed to be declared. But any benefit, this applies to politicians. And if you buy a townhouse for less than the market value, that is a benefit. I have not heard the Integrity Commission or anybody examine that salient point.
Yes.
Right? He got a benefit. Why did he get that benefit? Any questions, gentlemen?
So I believe they did say they investigated it and then they
No,
terminated
they
the
did investigate it,
investigation
but what did they
without
find out?
explaining why.
Listen, Professor, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I was asking
As usual.
a question this morning that this $480,000 discount, how does one determine whether or not that is a gift? Or is it just bygone discount, you know?
Well,
Anything you receive, any minister receive, of a substantial nature, I'm not talking about you get two mango from a neighbor or
Yeah.
anything like that. It have to be declared. Right? And I have not read where he declared that he got a benefit. That was the point.
Yes.
Right? We have a habit of arguing all around the topic, like we talk about people go and buy 10 gold in the dead of night, which is a damn lie. Right? The people only rang the Integrity Commission. They said Ken Gordon had left out for home, and he not living far from you. That was in the broad daylight. And they give him Ken Gordon number. When he rang Ken Gordon said, well, look, you are living far from him. This is important. Drop in by me, and we'll discuss the matter. When he drop in, Ken Gordon offer him a drink, which is normal. Ken Gordon is a man, wife is Margarita Gordon, who is known for hospitality and things like that. Everybody go on there to drink in the middle of the night. You can't twist things like that. You must deal with the truth. And again, you should have a reason, like when you talk about the support, those that don't be fine. You never give a reason. Right? So you join them. Any questions, gentlemen?
None. But thank you very much for your contribution.
You're welcome. Bye.
Have a good day. I also think that, and you know, the professor has raised a point about it's normal. If you come to my house, I will offer you something to drink. I think what it is, Professor, is that the question surrounding a matter dealing with the Integrity Commission, whether it was appropriate, and I can't believe we're raising this again, but whether it was appropriate for the Prime Minister to actually go to the chairman, the then chairman of the Integrity Commission's home, to discuss business dealing with the Integrity Commission. Just the environment and the setting alone will obviously lead to perceptions within the public domain. That happened, but that's in the past.
and the thing is, like, usually a politician will be aware of these things and will avoid these things. And it's the same thing for a gift, right? You can't just, random citizen cannot just gift the Commissioner of Police things, right? Or at least he's not supposed to. I believe in North America, in America, you can't just gift things to the police. You could give a free donut to police officers, but you can't like, oh, I'll pay for your son's college, like police officer. No, you can't just do that. There might be some ways to do it officially and legal stuff that right, but gifts, certain officials can't accept gifts anymore, right? The perception is just too dangerous for political careers especially, or for anybody who's supposed to be impartial, objective, right, and independent. So the discount has a lot of legitimate questions.
I also...
But it comes from the Integrity Commission because they apparently cleared it. The Integrity Commission cleared the discount after investigating. We kind of would like to know the reason why. Otherwise, speculation is just unfortunate, but it's reality.
Maybe the Prime Minister made a counter offer. Says you're selling this at, okay, this townhouse, let's just say at 1.8 million, and making a counter offer of 1.4 million. Could it be that way as well?
Would you label that as a discount?
No, it's explicitly suggests it's a discount.
It's
not a counter
right.
offer.
That comes from the seller, not from the.
I would wonder though, given that you've spent quite some time in Tobago, well, as a resident of Tobago, or anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago for a matter of fact, wonder if either of us would receive such a discount of that magnitude.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to get a discount of that magnitude. I don't think so.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, the phone lines are open. You can join the conversation still. We have just about 6 minutes left for the phone lines to remain open.
Local government elections?
Local government elections.
Going on?
628-4578, 623-9376. Sean, if you'd like to just repeat your question for the
Of course, I want to know if people care about reform, right? We have been told that opposition councillors want reform. But you might care about reform. Is that going to determine who you're going to vote for? Are you going to go what the Prime Minister said and you're going to follow the litmus test? We have a caller from Marima. Good morning, caller.
Gentlemen, morning.
Good morning.
You know how I want to get a second opinion on something.
Okay, shoot. What you want to know?
Now, put yourself in a licensing officer's shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go to Bigo, you don't know nobody. You meet a young lady driving a vehicle with a little child in it. She has no license and registration. But she's telling you something. 2 minutes later now you see special branch pull up to tell you, well, this lady is Miss so-and-so and so. So you are asking yourself now, because the special branch, right?
Yes.
All public servants, all senior public servants like ministers and others, and they're supposed to have a special branch guard with them.
I don't think so. I don't think that is a
what is
requirement.
she doing on the road with a little baby with no guard attached?
Yeah.
Suppose something that happened to her now,
And no license.
and no license, yeah.
Yeah.
But what could have happened to her?
Well, I understand where you're alluding to and who the individual is.
And I could understand it creating a scene and a thing. But at the same time, how come that case, if we hear nothing about that matter in the court at all?
I get where you're going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller.
I
I actually haven't heard of this, I don't think, unless it is what was reported in news, but I don't think it is.
What is that?
I assume he's not speaking about the Chief Secretary's wife.
Yes, I think he's
So she was right. She was driving on a license.
The special, yes, it's special branch. This is why he was speaking about special branch.
Right.
And yes, I believe that the Prime Minister is obligated to have special branch security with him at all times.
I think the Minister of National Security,
The
and
Minister,
the Attorney General.
the Attorney General, and it's the Attorney General, the Minister. I'm not even sure about Minister of National Security. I think he has he has a detail as well, but definitely the Prime Minister. And I know that the Prime Minister's wife, Sharon Clark Rowley, she also has
as well as the President.
an attachment.
And the President's spouse.
All that is given, and it's the same thing for the Chief Secretary. You see, this is where I'm a bit confused, and I'll be honest with you, caller. I'm not entirely sure myself. It would be wrong of me to give you a definite response when I am not truly aware of the privilege of whether or not the spouse of the Prime Minister or the spouse of the Chief Secretary require or are obligated to have special
branch. So we don't know if it's a requirement, but I've seen Anthony Kamona's wife had, when she was jogging around Savannah, there would have been an SUV trailing her within the Savannah so they don't stop traffic.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Right? And the thing is, even if that's fine, even if there's an obligation, even if there's nothing wrong with her having special branch with her, the point is she's driving herself, right? If special branch was driving her, then her lack of a license would not be an issue. But she's driving the car. So regardless of what special branch wants to say or not want to say, if you want to be a good example to the people who you are supposed to be governing, and I'll say this, if it was the Prime Minister's wife, I would say the same thing. If it was the opposition leader's husband, I would say the same thing. I don't care what your position is. You or your spouse gets caught driving without a license. Special branch wants to intervene, they should get fined too. Because that should be, to some extent, breaking the law.
Good morning, caller from Faizabad.
Sean, morning again.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, I think the problem with the licensed officers in Tobago, what they are peeved about, is under the Tobago House of Assembly Act, that they were supposed to recruit, or they have the power to recruit their own people as licensed officers in Tobago. And what they are taking it is that Trinidad is imposing officers on them rather than allowing them to hire their own officers. So that is a real issue. I think all you should contact Mr. Hochoy Charles, and he would give you the entire rundown with respect to the hiring of licensed officers for Tobago according to the Tobago House of Assembly Act.
But caller,
Who's stopping them? If
the
it's also
thing
on
is,
the TJ
the
Act.
exercise should not be what stops them from hiring licensed officers.
Yeah,
Right? There needs to be something more there. This is, and remember, this is the Tobago Division inviting extra licensed officers at a busy period in order to try to enforce road and traffic laws.
While I hear you on that, you know for a fact there is a power political play that is taking place in Tobago. Let me just play that we don't know that. So there is just constant battle.
Well, but caller, to be fair, I have seen Tobago police do road traffic exercises in holiday periods before Farley Augustine became Chief Secretary.
Yes, I am saying to you what they are saying, rather than send Tobago Trinidadians across there. Recruit Tobagonians so that they could have a fair exchange.
Right, but caller, I don't know exactly whose budget that comes out of, but the exercise should not be the thing that blocks the recruitment.
Again, you see, and this is where we have to take off the political cap and see for what it is that there is definitely a power struggle politically in Tobago, and Dr. Rowley is trying to impose himself on the people of Tobago in every particular way he could.
Caller,
And Farley is not going to have any of it.
Caller, thank you very much.
Caller, I have to disagree with you there.
I
Just because it's causing, for your statements to be true, I have to make too many assumptions.
There is the possibility, caller, and we could acknowledge it, that there is the possibility that there are political pressures with regards to maybe what you're suggesting there is also more so. There is no doubt there's political pressure on the Tobago House of Assembly from central government, and the Tobago House of Assembly is taking a certain stance. However, if I were to go with what you're sharing this morning under the TJ Act, what I'm trying to figure out is what is stopping the Tobago House of Assembly from hiring officers, if that is the case. There is no blockage as such. Again, it's probably just budgetary considerations. There should be no barriers to them hiring if that be the case.
The thing is, it depends on who's doing the hiring, right? So to be fair to the caller, if it's Trinidad and the budget from the central authority that deals with licensed officers that's doing the hiring, right? But if it's under the THA Act and one of the schedules of the THA Act, right? Possibly it's under the THA's budget. So that needs to be worked out. If it is under the THA's budget, then this exercise has no bearing whatsoever. Well, either way, it has no bearing whatsoever, right? But if it's under the THA's budget, then technically your theory holds no water because it's up to Farley to make that decision to hire or not.
So, as we conclude...
Although the TTPS, technically salaries are not paid by the THA, so I don't think the licensed officers will be paid by the THA.
If we are to conclude this morning on a note of Tobago, we were speaking about local government elections, but if we were to conclude on Tobago, and maybe some callers could express their thoughts tomorrow, and that is, Dr. Keith Rowley is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Mm-hmm. But what is the legacy of Dr. Keith Rowley in Tobago? How will Dr. Keith Rowley be remembered by Tobagonians?
Well, I think it very much depends on now how will the Tobago People's Party, aka the current THA executive, how they will be remembered, right? Somebody's going to be, to some extent, the villain, and somebody's going to be the hero, right? And it's not clear to me, because I have heard people supporting and saying that, no, me and my family in Tobago are against, right? So it's not clear to me where that lies, and I don't live there to get that litmus test directly. But here's an interesting thing to actually take it back to local government elections. The THA is the model by which the executive model for the rest of the reform is supposed to be modeled after. Apparently, when it was put into place, Robinson said if it works in Tobago, we could expand it to the rest of the country. Property tax should apply for the THA as well. Of course, it's not going to necessarily, I don't know how much more it's going to give them, right? Maybe once you add commercial properties into property tax, it might give the THA a boost. It might actually improve the situation of Tobago more than the back and forth with regards to the allocation from the national budget. Of course, again, it all depends. I don't have the math to know if it will be substantial or not. I do find it interesting that nobody speaks about property tax with regards to Tobago and what it might mean. The flip side is, if we have local government reform, now the THA is no longer the only other executive body. Now they're just one of 14 other executive bodies. And I wonder what that will also mean for Tobago and their situation.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we get into that conversation,
a lot of things.
Why don't we just bid farewell for today, and we can probably discuss that tomorrow.
Sure.
He's not going to want to discuss this tomorrow. No. I understand why. But if you do realize, I think over the last couple of weeks, things have been very quiet. And it's going to be quiet this week. It's going to be quiet next week.
Well, things have been quiet, but some things have been rumbling on the surface, various little things.
Do you think, do you think the campaigns have also, in a way, led to a sense of distraction?
I don't know. All I do know is that neither side is for the most part is opening themselves up to the public. The Prime Minister did get one question about Petrotrin, but it's been all very protected and safe.
Bear in mind, sides. There are multiple sides in this election.
Right, but at least the two main sides have not exposed themselves fully to the public. The Prime Minister got a little bit last night when somebody had, it was an actual legit question about Petrotrin and the refinery, right? He might have been a P&M supporter. Maybe he wasn't. He actually wasn't wearing red. But for the most part, when the Prime Minister speaks over the course of this election and when the opposition leader speaks, they've been more or less in home territory. Amongst they were preaching to their own choirs.
I think I would appreciate it that the Prime Minister continues conversations with the Prime Minister extensively following local government elections. Yes.
I mean, I don't know if he will.
And I would love, it would be so much appreciated if the opposition leader were to also take questions from the public.
Even, I mean, her public would be a step up, right?
Following the local government
elections. Yeah. I'll say this. I do find he looks a bit more professional recently in the current forum than she does.
I would use the word calm.
Recently.
I think I would use the word calm. He seems a bit more calm, you know, and he's a bit more fluid with his responses.
Yes.
Whether or not you accept it, or whether or not you like it.
Sometimes his own supporters throw him some curveballs and he has to be thinking, huh?
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Talking Point on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. That's Mr. Sean Michael Small, wishing you a good day ahead. Today is a good day to have a good day, and should it be a good one, a safe one, well, we'll see you again tomorrow morning from 8 o'clock. Until then, bye-bye.